All right, for turn one, the way my graphics settings are set up is I have pretty much everything on low, just so I get better frame rate. There's usually some sort of booth on the left side beyond the fence, but I don't see it, so I can't use that as a reference. But still, even if you can't see it, I think it's a slightly better reference. The skid marks right in front of me, there's sort of three skid marks right next to each other. Those are what I'm using as my braking reference. And don't worry if you think they'll disappear if you have a different track usage or from session to session. Don't worry about that because they're always there, so you can use them as reference. So I start braking just as those marks start. Sort of right around here, I'd be dropping down 2 gears in second. If I get a good run out of the last corner, I may bounce off the limiter a little bit in fourth gear before I start braking, which if you're qualifying or in a time trial is fine, but if you're in a race, it's preferably try to shift into fifth gear just so you don't hit the limiter. Because if you do it too often, especially behind other cars, you can blow your engine. And in this track, there's quite a few spots where you just get to the limiter right before you start braking. So qualifying, it's fine to keep it in the gear, but ever in a race, do try to go to the higher gear. All right, so I'd be braking, maybe pointing the car in just a little bit towards the corner, not quite parallel to the edge of the track. And later on, start easing. You want to have a fairly late turn in here and really not worry too much about the speed. Here he comes. Don't worry too much about the speed you carry into the corner, but instead how early you can get back on the throttle for this corner in particular. Generally, before the end of the curbing on the right side, you should be able to be completely on the throttle. And that curbing, you can use all of it as long as you don't touch the grass on the inside, because that'll upset the car a little bit and slow you down. Then on exit, you want to get early on the throttle, but you really don't want to go as far as to have to use this curbing or the AstroTurf beyond that. You want to keep it a bit further to the right side, simply so that you're able to not only come back to right to the edge of the track before you start turning in for turn two, but you want to also make sure your car is going straight for a few meters before you actually turn in, because it's one thing to be able to come back right on time to turn in, and it's another thing to already have the car straight and stable before you turn in. So as long as you have it straight for a couple of meters, you'll be fine. And through here in this weather, you can get away with simply lifting for this corner. I'd be typically braking and turning in at the same time at around this point, so just a bit before that green curbing on the right side starts. So maybe 7, 8 meters. And I'll be just using the brakes a little bit, but again, you can get away with simply lifting. The only thing that'll change is your turn in might be a little earlier, a little later. But personally, I'm lifting and brushing the brakes just a little bit, especially if I find I'm drifting wide a little bit. So through this curb, again, you want to use all of it. You just don't want to use the grass on the inside beyond the curb. Again, get on the throttle as early as you can. You can use all of the curb and even some of the green AstroTurf after it, and even a little bit of the gravel. Take advantage of the fact that gravel and iRacing here doesn't really slow you down. Right, so that last S we passed, they call turn 3. So next turn would be turn 4. And here is another corner where, in this sort of weather, if you get a good exit out of turn 2, you might just get to the rev limiter before you start braking in fourth gear. So right now and during qualifying, it's fine, but in a race, do try to shift up into fifth so you don't blow an engine over time. Here, I'm typically braking maybe 10 to 15 meters. So at around this point before the 50 marker. So 10 to 15 meters before the 50 marker. Be braking, shifting down twice, down into second. You want to keep it fairly close to the edge of the track, not quite right at the edge before you turn in, but fairly close. As you approach the apex, you really have to remember, for this corner in particular, it's very important. So as opposed to the first corner where I said, really think about how early you can get on the throttle. Here, even though it sounds counterintuitive because you have a long straight afterwards, here you really want to maximize the speed you can go into the corner with. So really don't worry too much if you're getting really late on the throttle, because you're only getting late because you carried more speed into it. So by the time you do get on the throttle, you're going faster anyways, and you might even gain time going down the straight. Through here, instead of really slowing it down and being able to get on the throttle right at this curbing, try to carry quite a lot more speed into it, and you'll probably be back on the gas a little while after the curbing. And because it's such a wide corner, there's quite a few different lines. You can go really wide and use all of the track on exit and get on the throttle very early. You can go really tight and really hug the curbing on the inside, or you can go middle of the road and only go as far as probably halfway, middle of the track on exit. But I think middle of the track is the fastest line, but only slightly. If you're comfortable with keeping it very tight the whole way around, you can get within a few hundredths of really mastering the middle line. The only line I wouldn't typically use is going as wide as I can and really using the exit curbing, because that's just a bit too wide and you cover too much distance. So typically I'll keep it middle of the road. Just get a feel for how wide the car wants to go. Don't try to straighten your wheel just so you go middle of the road. Try to keep it as tight as you can, but just get on the throttle early enough so that the car won't go any tighter than middle of the road, if that makes sense. Alright, so now later on, going into the hairpin, turn 5, I'll be in 5th gear. I'll typically start braking about 20 meters before the 50 marker, so at around this point. But this braking reference will change from person to person. You'll find a braking point once I explain the rest of the corner, and that's how, if you nail it the way you're supposed to nail it, you'll know you're either braking too early or too late. As I'm braking, for this corner, I really am pretty much aiming the car at about the middle of the track before I turn in. So maybe a bit less than that, maybe 2/3 of the track. So I'm aiming the car towards the inside as I'm braking in a straight line. And as I approach the apex, I'm slowly easing off the brakes, but I pretty much carry the brakes all the way to the apex. I pretty much get off them right before it. And it's very important to obviously use the curbing and be as tight as you can, but really only use it right at the very end, just so that you don't end up turning in too early. So you'll be turning in fairly late, and towards the end of the curbing, you should be able to get completely back on the throttle. So just experiment with braking maybe 30 meters before the 50 marker at first. And if you feel the car is too tight and you have to straighten the wheel to avoid cutting the track, or you have to use a little bit of throttle to avoid cutting the track, the next lap round, just brake 10 meters after that and go from there. So as long as you can just make the apex pretty late in that curbing, that's how much speed you can carry into it, and that's how late you should be braking. So through here, pretty similar to turn 1 and 2, you don't want to get too early on throttle so that you're not all the way to the left side of the track, so that you're able to come back to the right side of the track before you turn in for turn 6. Probably don't go any further than about this far, just so that, again, not only are you able to come back in time to the right hand side of the track, but you also have the car straight for a few meters before you actually turn in. Turning in, I'll be in 2nd gear here. I'll keep the gear, and I'll brake and turn in simultaneously a few meters before the dirt on the right side. So at around this point, I'll just be brushing the brakes, still in second gear, turning in. You want to use all of this curbing. Very important to use all of that. And again, all of the curbing on the outside and the AstroTurf as well. Through here, it's very important to keep the car beyond the white line a little bit and pretty much turn in right as this next bit of curbing starts. So right around this point, again, still in second gear, I'll be braking and turning in. Through here, I'll typically brush the brakes a little bit if the car understeers a little bit. And again, you want to use all of the inside curbing, not touch the grass. And on exit, again, you want to use all of the curbing, but if you're running 5 SPO, probably avoid using the green AstroTurf beyond that because, yeah, it's not doing it now. But once you're at speed, the car tends to bottom out due to the height difference between the AstroTurf and the curbing. So if you're running 5 SPO, probably don't use the green. So now for what is this? Turn 7. Let me go back a little bit. So for turn 7, pretty similar to the hairpin at turn 5. You want to aim the car towards middle of the track more or less as you start braking. And I'll be braking maybe 5 meters after the last marker on the right side. Around here, I'd start braking, aiming towards the middle of the track, shifting down all the way from third into first. And you really want to use a little bit of the curbing on the inside. And you'll get on the throttle. It's not very important here to get on the throttle early. What's way more important than that is to be able to be right in the middle of the track before you start turning in for the next turn for turn 8. So you want to be at around this point, braking and turning in for turn 8 as well. And you don't want to go all the way to the right side of the track exiting turn 7. So just delay the throttle a little bit so you're able to keep the middle of the track. And you'll be braking and turning in, maybe even using a little brake brushing to get the car to point in a little bit. More or less towards the end of the curbing, you should be able to get back completely on the throttle, use all of the exit curbing.
Are you staying in first gear?
Yeah, first gear.
Never shift up to second between those two corners?
No, I keep it in first. By this corner, I'll already be up into third gear. There's no real turn-in reference for this corner, so it's a little bit tricky. But you simply have to look at the corner to gauge where you have to turn in. And in this sort of weather, it's if you're on the perfect line, you can make it full throttle, but it's very, very tricky. 99% of the time I'm lifting just a little bit. And through here, but it's only a really small partial lift, not really to get the car to rotate, just to ensure you're not going too fast for the corner. Just make sure that you're lifting that tiny bit before the actual apex, just so that you're not losing the time on exit. Yeah, you use all of that curb, exit 1 as well, you can use a little bit. And then for the last corner, I'm typically braking about 8-ish meters, maybe 7 meters after the end of the curbing on my left side right now. Right at the end of that last bit of green curbing, I'll go maybe 5-7 meters further, and then I'll get on the brakes. Still in third gear, I'll keep third gear. And it's very important in this corner in particular if you're already a little bit more familiar with trail braking and brushing the brakes, it's very, very important in this corner to do it, particularly if you keep third gear through here. It's very important to do, otherwise you have to either slow down too much or just wait an eternity to be able to get back on the throttle. If you rotated the car decently well before you get off the curb, you should be able to get back completely on the throttle, and you'll find there's quite a bit of room on exit to use. So yeah, that would be the lap. Any questions? as I drive around to start the flying lap.
Should we stay off the AstroTurf on the exit of this corner?
No, yeah, definitely use the AstroTurf. Yeah. If the AstroTurf isn't causing the car to bottom out, or it's not causing the car to lose traction, which in this car really never happens, yeah, use it. More space you can use, the better. Yeah, anything else?
That's good. I'll have to watch it a couple more times to get through, but it was excellent.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah,
See what you got here, Johnny.
Yeah, so through turn 4, again, just get a feel for how wide the car naturally wants to go. Don't try to straighten the wheel, just make sure you're as tight as you can. That also doesn't mean that you want to be right at the inside of the track, if that makes any sense. As long as you don't straighten the wheel just to use all of the track, you should be fine and should be maximizing the speed you can gain through there. Yeah, just because it's such a wide part of the track, it makes a huge difference because of just how much extra distance you cover when you're using the whole width.
For the flying lap this week, Johnny was kind enough to share his replay from his time trials where he did a 141.95. I'd just like to say thank you again to Johnny for taking the time to give us a walkthrough. If you would like more help from Johnny, he also does private coaching sessions. You can find his contact information down below in the description if you're interested. The thumbnail of this video doesn't really do the drift justice. So here's some bonus content.